Mr. Pamla, a very good morning to you. Government would have had to make certain undertakings. Are you aware what those are?
Well, specifically no, but we were briefed by the President in an alliance meeting where he tried to explain, to say this is a special loan by the IMF, that most of the conditions that normally IMF will put forward first before lending a country any money have been set aside. So that is as far as we know about this loan. Yeah. But like we have said previously, is that we do not trust this institution. And our understanding is that since this institution doesn't accept physical collateral, is that it puts conditions first because it is a lender of last resort. And the way it manages this is that it insists on its own proposals and recommendations being accepted and implemented. Now, the reason why we're cynical of this statement by the President is because, firstly, if you look at where South Africa is, already some of the recommendations that normally would come from IMF, already the South African government has been trying to implement them. If you look at them, they've been trying to cut the public service. They've already frozen the wages. In fact, taken money out of the public service. So they are already trying to do what the IMF would normally recommend that they do, undermining collective bargaining, and even austerity budget. So that is why we believe that actually there is no such thing as a loan with no with no conditions, because already the South African government has already been trying to do that. So when they say there's no conditions, it's because already they were already implementing what the IMF would normally prefer that you implement before they give you any money.
Can I put to you what I have read this morning from some of the newspapers? And the understanding is that government would have had to make a commitment to cut spending, rein in the deficit, contain the debt to GDP ratio, and more importantly, this is where you also matter most, implement the urgent structural reforms. Now, these were part of what I would call battle lines some time ago when the finance minister had to push through his economic reforms, and he had problems, particularly with you. Do you think all of the above that I've listed is going to be achievable?
Well, look, if you look at what the South African government has been doing over the last 2-3 years, for an example, like the National Treasury, the Auditor General's report, they've been consistent in telling us that 10% of the budget is lost through wasteful expenditure and corruption. If you read the last 2 budget speeches, the one in February and the recent one, the supplementary budget, government has done nothing really to fix that problem. And they have been sitting with these reports for the last couple of years. So what they are doing here is that they've gone out there to borrow money under these extreme conditions for them to come and loot. So if you look at the scandals that we are reading about recently, about the way that this money has been mismanaged, the COVID-19 funds. So when you hear them going out there borrowing this money under these extreme conditions, only the workers and the poor really are going to pay a price. So the workers and the taxpayers have to be fearful of this, because they are going to pick up the tab under these very extreme conditions. And this money, very little of it is going to be spent where it matters most.
And so that's the question I wanted to come to you next about, that do you trust that this money from the IMF, a massive loan of 70 billion rand, will go towards its intended purpose?
Of course not. I mean, look at the amount of money that has been wasted by municipalities if you read the municipality audit reports. So you go look at the last audit report of the SOEs. If they are not really mismanaging it and they can't explain where they spent it, they hand it over to consultants who really do very little. These municipalities cannot explain anything with the help of consultants. So these consultants are being paid to do literally nothing. You look at the SOEs, none of them have managed to implement their turnaround strategies. Despite the fact that they've been working with consultants to draft these turnaround strategies, they are still asking for government to bail them out. So all of this money is going to be thrown back to these consultants, is going to be thrown back to corrupt entrepreneurs. Unfortunately, this is what we have witnessed so far. Even this crisis, no one takes it seriously enough to at least say, we're not going to steal just because people are dying and we're facing a crisis. This is where really workers are concerned, because if you look at with the level of corruption that we're witnessing, it is totally unacceptable.
Mr. Pamla, I'm out of time, but on that very note of corruption, yesterday we saw the president's spokesperson, Cosatu, stepping aside in order to allow for investigations to continue. Do you have any comment at all in as far as the Gauteng Health MEC, because the newspapers have alleged that there also may have been something untoward on his part? The ANC in Gauteng says it's going to hold a special PEC meeting to determine what. I cannot tell you. What is your general sense? Should the MEC of Health in Gauteng remain in office?
No, look, all you have to do is to go to the ANC manifesto. The ANC manifesto was very clear that individuals who are implicated in this kind of scandals should step aside until they've managed to clear themselves. So all the ANC needs to do is to honor the commitment it's made to the people of South Africa when it was asking for votes. It made it very clear that if individuals in leadership positions are facing these kinds of accusations, they will have to step aside. So all we will recommend for the ANC to do is to honor that commitment that was made to the people of South Africa by asking him to step aside until such time that he has been able to clear himself.
Sizwe Pamla, thank you very much for your time. Cosatu, spokesperson.